What is up, guys and gals? Welcome back to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Hands and Feet. Of course, my real name is Michael from HeHasAnswers.com, and we are dropping truth bombs in the battle of the mind. I'm going to keep it short in this intro. We are just going to start a documentary. It's an hour and 45 or so minutes long. It's called Death of a Nation. And my friends, we need to see how nations die so that we know what to look out for, which, hint, hint, is happening all around us right now and has been going on for a long time, and how we can stop it. So let's jump into that right now. Here we are. Hopefully it's loud enough for everybody. I don't think so. It's not loud enough for me. So you might have noticed it's by D'Souza Media. This is put together by a guy named Dinesh D'Souza. He is a very skilled political commentator as well as researcher. You know he's a good researcher because he says very inflammatory, difficult things about people, and he does not get sued and lose lawsuits for libel or slander, which means everything he's saying is the truth. And you can actually go and look for the sources of everything he says and find them. And it's alarming.
I will be with you forever.
Obviously, this is Hitler. I know they don't teach that in schools these days. Hey, thanks, Dave. Thank you. Now it's your turn to share this for other people to see. Yeah, everybody, be sharing this on whatever media platform you're watching from. Get people to watch. People need to know what is happening around us. And why is history so important? Why are we looking at Germany right now? I didn't put a very detailed description in tonight's stream because I realized Facebook was throttling my videos, so they weren't showing up as much. As the Reich dies, so must we. Reich actually translates roughly into kingdom. So Adolf Hitler wanted to start the third kingdom or third empire of Europe. And eventually the world. That's creepy if you know more about that. No Argentina. Not in not in this version. I think he's dropping enough truth bombs in this documentary not to go into the whole Argentina angle. That's too much for some people to contemplate.
When I was a boy, I was fascinated with the world. I wondered why nations live and nations die. How do you kill a nation? Like Germany. It destroyed several other nations before being destroyed itself at the end of World War II. Even powerful empires perish. Where's the Roman Empire today?
Good question, Dinesh.
Or the Soviet Union?
Well, there's another good question.
Nations can be destroyed from the outside by invasion and conquest. Or they implode from within by losing what makes them distinctive. I wonder if that could ever happen to America.
Let me know if the volume's okay, everybody. Hopefully it's good. Looks good on my meters here.
When I first came to America as a 17-year-old, I knew I was coming to a special place. I didn't know much about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, any of that. I liked it here because I liked the people. I saw Americans as independent, hardworking, self-reliant. Americans are fiercely individualistic, but they're also fiercely attached to family and faith, to community and to country. That's what the national anthem symbolizes, and the flag.
Thanks, Trev.
That
Thanks.
We're one country, and we're in this together. This is the America I know and love. But can it last?
America was never great!
There are those in America who want to end the America we love. They believe America is defined by class oppression and white supremacy. They want, in Obama's phrase, to remake America. For this to happen, America as we know it must die. Who will stop them?
Billionaire Donald Trump is hitting the presidential campaign trail. Yep, he says he may run for president.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it.
And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald
Keep.
Trump.
I lost 8 viewers when Donald Trump came up.
I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank.
Okay.
I guarantee it.
All right, all right.
Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president.
Everyone had a good laugh at Trump, but not the American people.
20,000 people turned out last night at a football stadium in Mobile, Alabama to hear Republican frontrunner Donald Trump.
Man, I feel like a billionaire already.
Show them how many people come to these rallies. Turn them. Go ahead, turn them. Go ahead.
Trump and his voters had a bond.
Like, seriously.
Like they've never seen before.
So right now we have Hillary's about a 75 or an 80% favorite with different versions of the forecast.
Is it fun to be at a Trump rally? I mean, is this the greatest?
How many people come out to Biden rallies right now, guys?
This mode, not even close.
The hell we can.
They believed Trump would fight for their America.
Such a nasty one.
So they stayed with him, and it drove the left nuts.
Chaos in the streets at a Donald Trump rally.
You can get him out. Get him out.
None of us thought we were going to be here, but we are.
especially her.
Why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask?
Trump and his supporters were in it together.
I am your voice. I am with you. I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you.
To be honest, I didn't think Trump would win. Hillary had total control of the Democratic machine.
Be reflected in
Her
the
foot on Sanders' throat. A sycophantic Hollywood and media. How do you fight against all that?
From NBC News, Decision Night in America.
First and foremost, it's finally here.
Maurice, here at the Javits Center, which is Hillary Clinton's election party site, there's a sense of building excitement, and I mean building excitement.
No, this is conservatives waking up and smelling the coffee and go, oh, right, our candidate was a moron.
And we have our first projection that Donald Trump will win in Kentucky.
Okay, have Kentucky. Who cares?
Small. It's small. Trump. But he is winning.
Lead beginning to go down a little bit, but still holding. So that's good news.
Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Trump, we project, will win. Texas. Anderson, this night is turning out to be a real nail-biter.
That Donald Trump is leading Hillary Clinton among white women in Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia.
I thought he was sexist.
Kid, you should be nervous. This is not kidding around anymore.
Louisiana, Montana, Missouri, Ohio.
Are you me?
Coming into the day, you had your projection above 70% for Hillary Clinton. Where is it right now?
But the crowd's now much more subdued here this evening.
Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida. All right, we have another major projection right now. Donald Trump will carry the state of North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Can we go back to Michigan? Because I'm not sure I saw it correctly. Was that a...
Huffington Post, what happened to your 98.4%?
CNN now projects that Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin. He's cracked the so-called blue wall.
You pathetic losers!
Winning Pennsylvania! Pennsylvania!
Some big news here, Megan. Huge news. Actually, the AP now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was called for Donald Trump.
It's over. Okay.
CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency.
I was happy he won. My film, Hillary's America, an expose of Hillary and the Democratic Party, played a role. But Trump made it happen. And when he won, that fact did not sit well with the left.
You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you haven't gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country. It's real.
Everybody is crying and so upset.
Scared, depressed, despair.
America is crying tonight.
She deserves to be the first female president. And that's what makes me so sad.
Sorry.
Nice, thanks, Dave.
Camera, but
get your abortions now.
People I'm speaking to think it's absolutely catastrophic.
Boastful, bullying, coarse, crude. That's the way they're going to see America. So
Ugly American.
Ugly American.
From slavery to, Nazism. We are not going to be okay.
Feels like the end of the world.
There are demonstrations in major American
Agreed.
cities across the country tonight over the election of Donald Trump.
Uh-oh.
Again, the left turned to violence.
Why do they keep... Why do they keep doing that?
We're gonna go after him in every conceivable way.
A Trump presidency is unthinkable and dangerous and damaging, so basically anything we do to stop that is perfectly fine, whether it's ethical or not, whether it's legal or not, it doesn't matter.
The political left immediately set out to reverse the election results with a sequence of strategies.
Today, Jill Stein of the Green Party called for recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
That recount actually increased Trump's lead.
Thank you. Thank you, darling.
There were countless stories of Trump losing the popular vote.
Donald Trump won fair and square.
How did he win fair and square? Hillary had more votes.
Then they tried this.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you.
Maybe they could convince Trump electors not to vote for him.
I'm going to talk to an Electoral College voter next who says it's gone as far as death threats.
The votes are 10 votes, Donald J. Trump.
You stole that! You stole that! You're pathetic! You don't deserve to be in America!
Doesn't deserve to be in America, guys.
Shame on the American people for voting for Trump.
Shame on you.
Tens of millions of Americans are totally fine with a man who is driven almost purely by racism and sexism and Islamophobia.
I genuinely do not understand how America can be this disorganized or this hateful.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump, okay? I just think you're dumb, okay? I think you're f***ing dumb.
Thanks, Anna.
How do you think people are going to vote if you talk to them that way? More than 50 House Democrats boycotted the inauguration of President Trump, although the left did show up to riot.
What Antifa is. This is what the anti-Trump movement is.
Hey, it's Lauren Southern.
It is total anarchy in the streets.
How often is it that the right goes and smashes up their own cities and other people's cities?
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
That chick's famous.
The left couldn't keep him from being sworn in as President of the United States, so they turned to impeachment.
Next week, there will be a vote to impeach.
It's obviously, it's no small matter when we're talking about impeaching the President of the United States.
You could write it down in stone. He will not finish his first term.
The Democrats will take over.
Well, the right never does that. Yeah, weird, eh? But we're crazy.
2019 without a single Republican vote.
Robert Mueller's Russia probe will eventually reveal misdeeds that are impeachment worthy.
Everyone is colluding with Russia except Trump.
Here's Donald Trump. Donald.
Maybe the sexual harassment stuff would finally stick.
Yeah, that's pretty gross.
There's a new report alleging that Lisa Bloom solicited funds to pay off women who would then accuse the president of sexual assault.
How about the 25th Amendment? Because, you know, Trump is crazy.
The amendment says the president can be removed if majority of the cabinet determines that he is unfit.
This is a dangerously, emotionally, and mentally unstable individual here.
Says that guy.
All this may seem unprecedented, but we've been here before. In 1860, America elected the first Republican president. Then, too, Democrats viciously attacked him. They called him an extremist and an authoritarian. Some sought to break up the country rather than accept his election. Lincoln saved America for the first time. And now, by tragic necessity, Trump is in a similar situation. What will the Democrats try this time?
Look at this Hitler speech, and we've translated it for you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to make Germany great again.
90% of what he says, I'm like, this guy gets it.
He's going to take our economy from here to here.
Yeah, he's definitely taking it to a higher level. I'd say his support is about up there, right around here.
Donald Trump is flirting with fascism American style.
There's a word for this, Ashley. It's fascism.
And they don't just call him a fascist.
Do you think President Trump is a racist?
I think he is a racist.
This was a white lash against a changing country.
The president is, quote, a white supremacist, and that his rise is, quote, a direct result of white supremacy.
There it is. Racism and fascism. And
Well,
we've heard it before.
Awful.
These incendiary accusations have been used for a generation to shame and smear Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and patriots. Is voting for Trump like voting for Hitler? Did Trump win because of fascism and white supremacy? Did he revive the worst strains of America's history of racism? Wouldn't that justify the left in rejecting the results of the election? But if they're wrong, If America is good, aren't we morally obligated to defend her? The stakes could not be higher. We're talking about the fate of the greatest nation on earth. Who are the real fascists? Who are the real racists? We must learn the truth.
Uh-oh. Truth
For
bombs.
progressives today, fascism is on the right, a philosophy of nationalism and authoritarianism. They call Trump a fascist because he's a nationalist. But so was my countryman Gandhi. So was Mandela and Winston Churchill. Lincoln was a nationalist. Were these men fascists? We've had authoritarian leaders since the beginning of time, but few were fascists. Look, Trump gets flayed in the media every day. Real authoritarians would have shut that down. So authoritarianism and nationalism don't exhaust the meaning of fascism. To go deeper, I sat down with progressive historian Robert Paxton, former head of Columbia University's history department. Paxton is no fan of Donald Trump. We have a group in America today, Antifa, which fashions itself anti-fascist.
Yes.
It drives speakers off the campus. Outwardly, it seems like there is some resemblance to Mussolini's black shirts, and the mission appears the same. In other words, to enforce a kind of ideological conformity by roughing up your opposition. Do you see a parallel between Antifa and the fascists that they claim to be fighting?
I think there's some tactical overlap. As soon as you start wearing a uniform and beating people up, you're obviously in fascist territory.
Now, does fascism matter today?
Yes.
Some people have said we are living through a fascist moment or a fascist strain in American politics.
Antifa.
Are you worried that that's true?
But now the fascist label seems to me to overlook two very important differences. One is fascist regimes did not want a free economy. They had a regulated economy. They had what was called corporatism. And all the business enterprises were required to participate in 5-year plans. And that is the opposite of what's going on.
So the principles of the American founding, the separation of state and society, limited government, individual rights, property rights, free markets. Would you agree that this is what the fascists hated?
The fascists and a lot of other people believed that these things had failed, and they were determined to propose an alternative that would revive their country.
Dateline, Rome, October 31st, 1922. Italy was a sitting duck for an ex-communist named Benito Mussolini. The lantern-jawed founder of fascism took advantage of the political unrest in Italy after World War I. Mussolini directed a march on Rome. The next step was complete dictatorial control, a step which the Italian black shirt leader took without a second thought.
When Mussolini started out, he was a Marxist. He was a socialist. He was the editor of a socialist newspaper.
I can imagine,
he had a
Tracy.
long background in socialist politics, right?
Exactly.
Mussolini allied himself with an intellectual, Giovanni Gentile.
Yes.
Gentile famously said, everything in the state and nothing outside the state, which Mussolini himself later repeated. How would you interpret this doctrine of sort of centralized state power?
Mussolini and the people who rallied to his cause, and this included some highly educated people like Giovanni Gentile, they were absolutely determined to make Italy strong, as it would come about by a central authority and direction. And I think that the state was the instrument by which they thought that Italy would be regenerated.
And loyalty to the state is the vehicle to mobilize that inner soul.
Yes.
Mussolini was responding to what historians call the crisis of Marxism. Marx predicted that worker revolts would erupt in every industrialized country. But this never took place. Marx thought workers around the world would identify with each other on the basis of class. He rejected nationalism, saying a working man has no country. But Gentile, though himself a socialist, noticed that during World War I, working men fought for their own country. Mussolini and Gentile concluded that a new type of socialism was needed, that would fuse nationalism and socialism. They called it fascism.
No!
And this is why socialists and progressives in America, many of whom had given up on orthodox Marxism, were drawn to fascism.
In the working out of a great national program that seeks the primary good of the greater number.
Our new president at the time, Franklin Delano
Indeed, Cyril.
was infatuated by
Indeed.
Mussolini. He called him that admirable Italian gentleman. I am much interested and deeply impressed by what he has accomplished and by his evidenced honest purpose in restoring Italy. Mussolini reviewed FDR's book in an Italian magazine. His conclusion? FDR is one of us. He's a fascist. FDR dispatched members of his brain trust to Rome to study Italian fascism, with the view of importing some of it here.
Brain trust.
Rexford Tugwell, one of FDR's closest advisors, after returning from Italy, observed, "Fascism is the cleanest, neatest, most efficient piece of social machinery I've ever seen. It makes me envious." The head of FDR's NRA, or National Recovery Act, Hugh Johnson, spoke of the shining example of Mussolini. He carried fascist literature in his pocket, and he called for the end of free market capitalism in America. He empowered industrial committees in every industry to set wages and prices and report to the federal government. Clearly, FDR recognized fascism was on the left. He saw it as more progressive than the New Deal. Mussolini was clearly a man of the left. But what about the ultimate fascist of them all, Adolf Hitler? Was he a man of the left? To figure this out, we must go to Europe.
Oh boy. You were lied to in social studies, friends. I was too.
Hitler, like Mussolini, was a veteran of World War I. His politics were formed here, in Schwabing, in the atmosphere of bohemianism and sectarian socialism. The communist Lenin lived here in exile. Hitler and Lenin both frequented the same pub. Lenin famously didn't pay his bar tab. Imagine Lenin sitting here arguing with friends on how to save communism. Lenin lived just a block up the street. Hitler lived a block over. Hitler changed the name of the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The very term Nazi is a compression of two words, National and Sozialista. Check out the official Nazi platform. State-controlled healthcare, profit sharing for workers and large corporations, moneylenders and profiteers punished by death, state control of education, state control of media and the press, state control of banks and industries, seizure of land without compensation, state control of religious expression. This reads like something jointly written by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Read the Nazi platform at the Democratic National Convention, and most likely it would provoke thunderous applause. Like Mussolini and Lenin, Hitler was anti-business,
No doubt, Tracy.
anti-bourgeois, and
It's probably even worse.
anti-capitalist.
It has been.
But unlike Mussolini and Lenin, Hitler was also a racist. His racism, too, was rooted in his hatred of capitalism and business. He called the Jews greedy bankers. Hitler set out to destroy the Jews, confiscate their wealth, and redistribute it through Nazi, socialist, and welfare state programs.
Vereinigt euch zum internationalen Klassenkampf!
Another group Hitler hated were the communists. Not because they were socialists, but because they took their orders from Moscow. His thuggery started right here at Schellingstrasse 50, Hitler's Nazi headquarters.
Ruhe!
We must strike the communists back tenfold.
10-mal so stark zurückschlagen!
Hitler saw the communists as traitors to Germany.
That's what you got. Now, communists, beer halls, factories, universities!
Deutsche Kriegspartei! He was a National Socialist, and they were International Socialists. He patterned his brown shirts both on Mussolini's black shirts and on the Ku Klux Klan.
It's a good motto, Dave.
Both about the same size.
Where do I vote?
3 million members. Both groups targeted a vulnerable minority. In the case of the brown shirts, Jews. In the case of the KKK, blacks. And both groups were extensions of a political party. In the case of the brown shirts, the Nazi Party. In the case of the Klan, the Democratic Party.
Wait, what? Democrats KKK? No, that can't be true.
In November of 1923, Hitler and his brown shirts took over the Burger Braukeller, a popular Munich beer hall.
Platz machen hier.
If you want to drink here, you must be a Nazi! The National Revolution has broken out. Nobody is allowed to leave. Oh, that's interesting. Holy smokes. Either the German Revolution begins tonight, or we will all be dead by dawn. It's one way to stir up a rally.
The following day, Hitler and 2,000 party members marched on Munich, met by police.
No
Hitler
doubt.
was arrested and sent to Landsberg prison, a formative period in his life.
Time to get a typewriter.
Hitler dictated Mein Kampf to his fellow prisoner, Rudolf Hess.
Dictated. National Socialism is the determination to create a new man. There will no longer exist any individual arbitrary will, nor realms in which the individual belongs to himself. The time of happiness as a private matter is over.
See how remote all of this is from the principles of Abraham Lincoln and the American founding? Hitler, however, had a much greater affinity for progressives and Democrats.
If you tell a big enough lie, and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed.
It was here Hitler got a big idea from the Democratic Party, one that would shape his murderous campaigns.
Eugenics.
According to Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer John Toland, Hitler often praised the extermination of the red savages who could not be tamed by captivity.
Oh
Hitler
my.
admired how Jacksonian Democrats gunned down the millions of Redskins to a few 100,000 and now keep the modest remnant under observation in a cage. His idea was to do to the Poles, the Slavs, the Eastern Europeans, and the Russians precisely what the Jacksonian Democrats did to the Indians. Hitler came to power in 1933.
Oh my gosh.
On the other side of the Atlantic, another charismatic leader, FDR, was elected. The two men recognized each other as fellow progressives. Here's what the Nazi newspaper, Völkischer Beobachter, said of the FDR administration. We too, as German National Socialists, are looking toward America. The Nazi paper congratulated FDR for replacing the uninhibited frenzy of market speculation with the adoption of National Socialist strains of thought. Of FDR's New Deal, the Völkischer Beobachter said, "We fear only the possibility that it might fail." Hitler quickly consolidated his power. He executed leaders of the brown shirts who had challenged his authority. This was the famous Night of the Long Knives. Some progressives try to portray Hitler as a right-winger by insisting he was anti-gay.
Read the
Hitler
pink
knew
swastika.
that the brown shirt leader, Ernst Röhm, was a notorious homosexual, as were many other brown shirts. When Hitler showed up to arrest Röhm, he encountered a remarkable scene.
Rome, you are under arrest. You are a traitor.
Röhm publicly suggested that he, not Hitler, was the true leader of the Nazi Party.
That was a big mistake.
When
Oh my
Heinrich
gosh,
Himmler
3.
urged Hitler to purge the gay brown shirts out of the Nazi movement, Hitler refused. Hitler said he didn't care what the brown shirts did in private, as long as they were good fighters. Hitler was no social conservative. Earlier we saw what Hitler learned from the Democrats, but was there anything he learned from American progressives?
We are told so many
Investigative
lies.
journalist Edwin Black, the son of Holocaust survivors, is the author of The War Against the Weak.
Now, you have written that eugenics in America, and this is true in other parts of Europe as well, was a progressive cause. Progressive in what sense?
Progressive in every sense. This was not done by people who thought that they were race haters. This was done by the do-gooders, the liberals, the people who wanted to...
There's Margaret Singer in the middle.
Margaret Sanger, a progressive...
Or Sanger,
who wanted
sorry.
to help humanity. And her approach to doing that was to wipe away the existence of 2/3 of all people.
You mean 2/3 of the entire American population?
Yes, of course.
And she actually explicitly said this?
Of course. She wanted to get rid of human weeds. She wrote about this extensively. At one point, Hitler wrote fan mail to one of her colleagues on her board and said, your writings are my Bible.
Now, this is Madison Grant, the head of the New York Zoological Society. Tell me about the meeting between Madison Grant and Whitney, another prominent eugenicist.
Madison Grant is discussing his fan mail from Adolf Hitler, and Whitney has an identical letter just like it. And so they both have letters in which Hitler thanks them. All these eugenicists saying, we have had a dramatic impact on Germany.
And you quote an American progressive eugenicist basically saying, hey, whoa, we've got to pick it up. The Nazis are beating us at our own game.
That's right. While we were pussyfooting around, the Nazis were beating us at our own game.
Why is it the case today, if I open a Planned Parenthood brochure, I get a completely different picture of Margaret Sanger than anything that you've described?
What's going on is the reshaping and the falsifying of history. The Nazis also invented history. There's a role for people like me and a role for people like you. We spend our lives trying to authenticate the real history.
We've learned how Hitler got his murderous conquest scheme from the Jacksonian Democrats. We've also learned how he got eugenic schemes from left-wing progressives. But what does Nazi racism owe to the Democratic Party? I went to see the historian and sociologist Stefan Kuehl, who has developed an international reputation for books like The Nazi Connection. I met with him in Munich.
What was the essence of the Nuremberg laws? These are the laws of 1935. What did they seek to do?
They actually gave a first definition of what is a Jew. It was not very easy for the Nazis to define what is a Jew.
Gentlemen, we are here to create laws that will enable the German people to deal with the Jewish problem. There's no precedent for such laws in Germany, nor any other industrialized nation. How can we use the law to strip citizens of their rights? We do have a precedent for such laws. This is our blueprint. Subjects without citizenship rights. America? Wow. Oh my gosh, colored. Second-class citizens. Why single out the Jew? The law can just forbid any interracial marriage, avoiding specific references to Jews. Will help with international support. Nonsense. The Americans clearly single out the African, so we can single out the Jew. Then who is a Jew? Person with a Jewish father but German mother? Does that constitute a Jew? How does the American identify the Negro? One drop rule. Any discernible black ancestry makes one count as black. Human hardness. Even if someone looks white, if someone acts white, they could still be counted as black? Then one drop rule does seem too harsh. We can limit the blood count to 3 Jewish grandparents. Wow.
The Nazi Nuremberg laws were directly modeled on the segregation laws of the Democratic Party. Every segregation law in the American South was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by Democratic officials. As for the Democratic one-drop rule, incredibly, the Nazis found it too racist even for them.
Friends.
The Nazis also hated freedom of speech. The Nazi concept was called Gleichschaltung, which means bringing all the cultural institutions in line with Nazi ideology. This was the significance of the Heil Hitler salute and the draping of swastika flags off balconies. These things signaled humble conformity to Nazi doctrine.
Look at all the sheep in the back that aren't brown shirts but are clapping along. Yeah, cool, book burning. Like, figure out what side you're on.
On the German campus?
Die Elitentheorie schlägt vor, dass eine kleine Minderheit von politischen und ökonomischen Experten die meiste Kraft besitzt, nicht demokratisch gewählte Führungskräfte.
Jewish propaganda! This is my classroom! You're wrong, this classroom belongs to the Führer. Oh. Ow. You are no longer free to speak your mind. Wow, that didn't take them long, hey?
Dissent can quickly escalate from episodic violence to mass murder. Hitler's Night of the Broken Glass was justified as a lawful confiscation of firearms. This made
confiscation of firearms
against Nazi assault.
Keep your guns.
Carry out his goal to burn Jewish businesses, destroy synagogues, and eliminate Jews as a competitive threat in the German economy. Hitler didn't just target synagogues, he also targeted Christian churches.
There's Niemöller.
Know this because they bought the progressive line,
Pastor Niemöller there is the same pastor that famous quote comes from that goes something along the lines of, they came for the communists, I was not a communist, so I did not say anything. Then they came for the socialist, I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the laborer or whatever. Then they came for the Jew, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. That was Pastor Niemöller, who resisted the Nazi movement.
That Hitler was a Christian. When coming to power, Hitler knew he needed Christian support, and so he feigned public belief in Christianity. But privately, in a series of recordings, Hitler railed against Christianity as a destructive institution contrary to science and the natural law of survival of the fittest. Once in office, Hitler persecuted Christians. His ultimate aim? The total destruction of Christianity in Germany.
A lot of the Roman Catholic Church sided with him, which is disgusting.
As a progressive, Hitler despised religious liberty. Nazism was his religion.
And a lot of the Lutherans did too, sadly.
With Germany the high altar, and Hitler himself the new Messiah. Hitler was no Christian.
Messiah means savior.
American progressives cheered Hitler's rise to power. They saw fascism, with its social control and its glorification of the centralized state, as a model for the future. With total control of the people in place, Hitler could now implement his master plan.
Wow.
In 1939, he invaded Poland. Within 2 years, he and Mussolini controlled continental Europe. Japan was at war with China. Fascism was on the march across the world. Soon, Hitler would declare war against America. Once Hitler acquired war captives, he saw a way to implement his own slave plantation, which he called the concentration camp. Concentration camps, which were forced labor camps, should be distinguished from death camps, whose sole purpose was extermination. What was the origin of these death camps?
As Minister of Interior, directed a program aimed at aged, insane, or incurable Germans, the so-called useless eaters. Thousands were committed to special institutions. Few ever returned. Evidence proves they were murdered because they were useless to the plans of the Nazi conspirators.
Let's turn to the Nazi euthanasia laws. First of all, would it be accurate to say that we aren't talking about real euthanasia?
Without consent, neither of the parents nor of the handicapped himself, yeah.
So euthanasia was a pure euphemism, just...
Yes, it was killing. It was a killing program. They started the killing of mentally handicapped before on a very low-scale level, but started systematically with the killing of mentally handicapped after the beginning of the Second World War.
And isn't it true to say that some of the personnel who administered the euthanasia camps were also then later deployed to the so-called death camps that were used on a much larger industrial scale?
That's very clear. We have a technology transfer and a personal transfer from the killing of mentally handicapped to the killing of Jews. And especially the whole stuff operating the gas chambers, for example.
Let me ask you about Joseph Mengele, the notorious Nazi doctor at Auschwitz. When you read about him, he saw himself as a progressive, somebody advancing not only the cause of science, but the future benefit to humanity.
Progressive idea was very strongly part of the Nazi ideology.
Would it surprise you if I were to tell you that after the war, Mengele went down to South America, where he actually had a sort of career as an abortionist?
No, not at all.
In classic progressive fashion, Mengele made an easy transition from one form of killing to another.
It's in his blood, he can't get enough.
once American and Allied troops liberated the concentration camps, once the world saw these ghostly, emaciated, starving figures emerge from those camps, Nazism, fascism, and theories of racial superiority were permanently discredited. Immediately following the war, in the Nuremberg trials held here in room 600, the full horror of fascist and Nazi atrocities was put before the world.
The United States of America present count 1 of the indictment, that all the defendants participated as organizers or accomplices in a common plan or conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
Fascism became the quintessential reference point for human evil.
Hat Ihnen Hitler ausdrücklich verboten, das Memorandum am Polen vom 30. August.
Opposition political parties which might defeat or obstruct the policy of the Nazi Party.
Das haben Sie durchaus richtig verstanden.
Hermann Wilhelm Goering, on the counts of the indictment which you have been convicted, the tribunal sentences you to death by hanging.
American progressives were in a panic. They realized that if future generations of Americans knew the intimate connection between progressivism and the Democratic Party on the one hand and the fascists and Nazis on the other, they would be finished. And so, taking a page from Hitler himself, they settled upon the idea of a big lie. First, they would muddle the meaning of fascism itself. They would take the socialism out of National Socialism. Second, they would move fascism from the left-wing column, where it had always belonged, into the right-wing column. But we must not believe that big lie. The fascists and the Nazis were always on the left. They formed a mutual admiration society with the American left. Even worse, the most destructive and genocidal schemes of the fascists and Nazis were inspired by American progressives and the American Democratic Party. That is the crushing historical truth. Now we go from the left's big lie about fascism to its big lie about racism. Progressive Democrats typically blame racism on America and on the founding. But were the founders to blame for the elaborate system of slave plantations? Historian Alan Gelzo teaches at Gettysburg College and is the author of several award-winning books on the Civil War.
If we speak of the founders as a whole, would it be accurate to say that they believed A, slavery is on a path of extinction, and B, that slavery is a regrettable thing, a bad thing?
They were confident that slavery was going to disappear because it is a contradiction of our fundamental principles.
Are you saying that there really wasn't a formal pro-slavery ideology at the time of the founding?
There's no pro-slavery philosophy that works into the founding.
The founders took specific measures to restrict slavery. They outlawed the slave trade. They prohibited slavery in the vast Northwest territories under the Northwest Ordinance. And they mounted such a strong critique of slavery that by the end of the founding era, slavery went from being a national to a regional institution. Then this happened.
All over the world, the impact of this simple invention was felt almost immediately. Eli Whitney put together a few boards and rollers and gave the world a giant industry. Cotton was king.
This new expanded plantation system demanded a political party to defend its interests, the Democratic Party.
At the time of the founders, they thought slavery was a dying institution. But in the 19th century, that had changed. They now began to talk about slavery as a progressive institution. And why not? As George Fitzhugh, one of the principal pro-slavery propagandists, argued, isn't slavery the same thing as what we are reading about among European socialists? What else is slavery Fitzhugh argued, but a practical form of socialism.
Fitzhugh even tried to sell his idea to black leaders. He defends slavery as an early form of the welfare state. Fitzhugh argues that in slavery, unlike in capitalism, the slaves who cannot provide for themselves are looked after from cradle to grave.
If you took the logic of that argument, the idea that the slave plantation is a kind of extended family, that from each according to his abilities to each according to his need, Marxian principle, that this was not only an excuse for enslaving black people, but there was nothing in the logic that prevented you from enslaving a white guy.
Why not enslave white people? Or at least reduce them to an economic status a little better than that? Why not also extend slavery into the northern free states? Lincoln thought he discerned the hand of a plot here.
Would it be accurate to say that one of the key differences between the Republican and the Democratic Party is that the one party is founded on the idea of keeping the fruits of your labor, and the other party is founded on the idea we get to take your stuff either for our own use or because we've got some other better use for it?
That became the credo of the Democratic Party.
The great opponent of the Democratic plantation was Abraham Lincoln. In a phrase, Lincoln described the evil of slavery at its core.
You toil and work and earn bread, and I'll eat it. Whenever I hear someone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried out on him personally.
Same with socialism.
Exposed democratic hypocrisy.
Wolves devouring lambs. Not because it is good for their own greedy maws, but because it is good for the lambs.
For Lincoln, the fundamental sin of slavery, curiously enough, was not its racial aspect. That comes after. The fundamental sin of slavery is theft, because it says, you work, you toil, I will take the proceeds of that. And Lincoln's great anxiety was to point out how Northern Democrats had conspired together with Southern Democrats to promote justifications of taking away the fruit of other people's labor.
Guelzo is exposing the progressive strategy of blaming slavery on the South. The Northern Democrats were in league with the Southern Democrats, making slavery the sin not of the South, nor of America, but of the Democratic Party.
Northern Democrats were fully as complicit in this as Southern Democrats.
The powerful New York Democrat Martin Van Buren applied the idea of rural plantations in the South to urban centers in the North. When new immigrants came to America, they were poor, insecure, desperate. Some came as indentured servants. Like the slave populations in the South, they were a vulnerable people. Van Buren created an army of big city bosses, like Boss Tweed, who ran Tammany Hall in New York City, who would raid the treasury and use the money to create a patronage system that would keep immigrant populations collectively dependent on and voting for the democratic machines, like in this scene from Gangs of New York.
Here to take the chill off your soul and the weight off your heart. Welcome to America, son. Your long, arduous journey is over. Go back to your own country. Move Tammany! America for...
So before the Civil War, the Democrats' majority status depended upon rural plantations in the South and urban plantations in the North. Lincoln warned that the goal of the Democratic Party was to turn all of America into a plantation. To stop Lincoln, the Democrats went to war. Lincoln won the war and demolished the old Democratic plantation. Republicans took steps to integrate former slaves into American life to create for the first time a multiracial democracy. Republicans pushed through 3 landmark constitutional amendments, freeing the slaves, guaranteeing the right to vote, and securing equal rights under the law. The Democrats overwhelmingly opposed all 3, and these were the Northern Democrats. The Southern Democrats had not yet been let back into the Union. The Democrats needed a new enslavement strategy and someone to implement it. Democratic President Woodrow Wilson knew the national government had defeated the old slave plantation, so he and other progressives wanted a new plantation system ruled by the national government, so it would last forever. Wilson's first step? Federal segregation. He forced his departments to establish separate workstations and restrooms for blacks. Wilson's second step? Racial terrorism. Wilson screened the film Birth of a Nation in the White House. It spurred a national revival of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan had previously been confined to a handful of southern states. Now it stretched from coast to coast. The Klan became the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. Wilson was the first progressive president. Progressive here means progress toward the powerful centralized state and away from the American founding. In the Democrats' new plantation scheme, the big house is the White House, and the plantation master is the president.
Whoa, boy.
Now let's turn to modern racism, racism in the post-war era. Here's what the left says. The Democrats may have been the party of racism a long time ago, but they underwent a conversion. Now they are the champions of civil rights.
You've probably heard people on Facebook say that, right?
In the 1960s, the two parties switched sides, brought about by Richard Nixon's Southern strategy. Supposedly, Nixon converted the racists in the Democratic Party, the Dixiecrats, into Republicans. So today, Democrats are the good guys, and Trump and the Republicans are the bad guys.